Hello and welcome to Exchanges for another week. Huge show today because technology is in every single part of our life. Not only is it in every single part of our life, it is now governing what we do throughout the day. And by throughout the day, I also mean how we sleep, how it's infiltrating our brain, how it is making our sleep an incredible indicator of our performance. It is, in some arguments, as bad as being drunk if we don't get it done properly. And AI and technology, social media, etc. is certainly at the forefront of a belief at the moment that sleep and how we sleep is directly correlated with it. But what if it can be also seen in a good light? And how will technology into the future actually be entwined into things like insurance, be in things like delivery of leadership, in the overall output of corporations? Because if we are finding that our CEOs and our leadership group are having 19-hour days and no sleep at all, how can they be entrusted with delivering the results and the leadership required to get us to where we need to be? That is the big question that one of Australia's preeminent lecturers, researchers, and AI futurists is wanting to discuss with us today. Dr. Catherine Ball is an absolute leading expert in this space. If you haven't seen her before, do yourself a favor. Go and look her up. She is absolutely incredible. And her latest book is what I want to discuss with her today about the interaction between sleep and technology into the future. Before we go any further, don't forget, we are currently sponsored by More. That's a lifestyle by design app for all property investors out there looking to get their lifestyle from the properties that they own. That's more, moorr.com.au to find out more. But now, here's Dr. Catherine Ball. Dr. Catherine Ball, welcome to Exchanges.
Thank you for having me. You know, I've got a podcast fan at the moment, Evan. You're the only one I'm doing this with. Thank you.
As I said, off air, thank you. Like, it's an incredible chance to get to talk to you because what a time to be talking to somebody that is an absolute, not just an expert, but just a visionary in the future of tech, where tech is going, AI. But for those of you that are not watching it, I'm holding up Catherine's new incredible book. Those who are on YouTube can see it. The Future of Sleep. I read this in about a day and a half, and I gave it to my wife. This is astonishing in terms of how you have linked tech to sleep. But not just that, from me, because I'm a nuffy with this kind of stuff as well, is linking the studies and how it works. I'm going to start really, really macro. Why sleep first and foremost?
When we think about the things that make us human, and we think about the evolution of artificial intelligence, my husband's bringing me a cup of tea live in the podcast recording. Look at this. Thank you, Jeremy. There is my husband with my tea. The one thing I realized was that we almost try to give the computers our intelligence when we're forgetting to think about our own. So then I started thinking about what technologies are out there where we're looking at human intelligence augmentation rather than artificial intelligence development. And I got into this conversation with a few people around sleep. And it's interesting, when I look at people that I know that are really successful in the tech industry, for example, or the business world, and if you ever sit in the first lounge at any international airport, the one thing you realize is everyone is very well rested and nobody is rushing. Everyone is very calm and collected. And so I was like, what is this currency that these people that are ultra high performing, ultra high net worth, interesting people that are doing great things in business and for the world have in common? And they have this sense of peace and rest around them. So I was like, okay, if we take the geek chic of all this tech that we're trying to get to have, like, you know, AI augmented eyes and AI augmented brains and AI, what are we doing to actually evolve naturally around our own capabilities cognitively? And the one thing that I kept coming back to was sleep. And the one thing that I also kept recognizing was under-researched, understudied, underfunded, but affected every single human being on this planet was sleep. I was like, so now we've started seeing this rise of what they refer to as the rest economy. So the money that people are going to make from people like us that want to maximize our sleep. And I'm like, here's the rub. as Shakespeare would say. We're going to have all of these tech companies selling us solutions around our sleep. But actually, do we really understand our own sleep? Do we understand our own patterns? How much of it is because we live in this 24/7 electrified society? How much is it to do with screens? But how much is it to do with actually how much we know of our own chronotypes, our own biology, our own changes with sleep? So that's why sleep in a nutshell, mate, Evan. It affects everybody. It affects everything. We know we've got a 66 billion a year loss in Australia alone to our economy because of fatigue.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because, okay, I want to first of all get...
So money, health, wealth, restfulness, billionaires, tech at the CES, tech shows, tech bros. That is why I thought, oh, sugar, we've got to start having a conversation about sleep and look at the technologies that are coming to help us with our sleep.
You spoke then, let's integrate tech, because at the moment there is a perception, right? And I don't want to spoil your answer because I know, because I've read your book. The perception is tech influence bad for sleep, right? So doom scrolling, going through, massively ramping up your dopamine, screwing up your serotonin, that kind of idea that basically overloading on screen time is incredibly detrimental to your sleep. Now, it might be detrimental to other aspects of your cognitive movement, but your research doesn't say that, does it? It's actually something else that it really triggers why sleep in the 21st century, for those that don't have rest, as you call it, are leading to incredibly bad night sleeps.
It's really interesting because I'm not a neuroscientist by training, but I'm an ecologist, and there's something about neuroecology and ecology, the central tenets. Is really interesting to see how, and I did a lot of research on all the best-selling books, did a lot of research into some of the papers, and then I saw these technologies that were coming, from some of these backgrounds in neuroscience. We've got this idea of like a dopamine detox. Everyone talks about, like there's that wonderful book, Stolen Focus, and there's all these other books about how things are stealing our attention. Vivienne Westwood, the designer, would never have radios or TVs in her studio because she referred to them as weapons of mass distraction. And now we're walking around with weapons of mass distraction literally attached to us in various forms, or we're carrying it, or we're sleeping with it, or sleeping next to it. And it's a distraction and a detractment from our natural biological need to refresh. And so when we think about everyone blaming screen time, everyone blaming lights, I'm like, well, what screen time? If you were watching a nice relaxing piece of Shakespeare, we're using non-melanopic or melanopic light in your lights in your house, in a smart house that recognizes your chronotype, with a smart bed that knows the temperature you need to be at, with a smart shower that wakes you up the right way in the morning, with smart probiotics that are tailored just for your microbiome. The technological answers to having better sleep are there, but we're just not using them. And you can't say less screen time or less this, that, and the other. You can say appropriate use of screen time, and actually building technology into our sleep cycle and building technology into our sleeping lives. None of us can go and live in caves right now and, live in trees. Like, we have to look at how our life works. And this is where I feel like someone like Bunnings or Harvey Norman, here's a call out to Bunnings and Harvey Norman, you need to create sleep labs, because you will sell this stuff gangbusters. If you can put in triple glazing, blackout blinds, humidifiers, smart temperature management, smart beds, smart pillows, smart mats, smart blankets, smart pets, all of these things, people will spend this money because they recognize the dollar value they get from investing in rest. So yeah, the tech isn't so simple as switch it off, because we can't seem to switch it off. We're all a little bit addicted. But how do we actually recognize and build into our technology that ability to let our brains wind down and rest? The lighting thing is really interesting. I didn't realize how much money was going into lighting with regard to health and wellness and well-being and genuine longevity and health span information. So the smart lamps were something that I was just in love with when I was at CES in Vegas. The idea that we just even need lamps and lights in our house that help us produce melatonin. You don't need to take a melatonin supplement. Your house is literally helping you make melatonin. I was like, we're just not having these conversations, are we?
No, I want to declare my hand here, a little bit anecdotal, in the fact that when I first got into the work industry, my parents owned a bedding company. So selling sleep was something that we used to do. And you talk also in the book about how, particularly around most things, not just with sleep, but with most material, it's around the physiology. It's around how do we actually change the physiology to improve X, Y, Z. Now, again, my anecdotal input is that, the firms that we were selling would have endorsements from, the Physiology Association or the Chiropractic Association or what have you, because the way they were selling sleep was around the idea that if we give you a physiological benefit, you'll sleep better. But what you argue in the book, particularly in your chapter around the science of sleep, is it's not that simple anymore. And it's more to it than just looking at it from a physiological standpoint. It goes psychological, but it also goes into mindset. Take us through how the data, your research has actually brought on that concept.
So I travel a lot globally, right? So I was playing this game from an international traveler's perspective. I've also worked shift work in the past. I've done lots of different jobs in the last 46 years of my life. And so I have family members who are shift workers, for example. I find shift work and humanoid robotics to be a really interesting friction point that's going to really explode in the next few years, hopefully not literally explode. But this idea of what do we do when we travel? What do we do when we're on planes? What do we do when we throw ourselves out? Because sometimes I think if you look at the status quo and go, oh, we can just give you a better night's sleep. We can improve your productivity by 100% using this Fiduciary AI system, using these smart beds that if you've got a smart bed at home, it knows your settings, that when you fly to Tokyo for business, the bed knows your settings. When you fly to New York for business, the bed knows your settings. And then when you're on that plane, the plane knows your settings. And also, it actually even comes back to the simple olfactory. So take a pillow that's your pillow because it will smell like your pillow. Even though you think it won't smell of anything, it smells like your pillow. Go back to your basic baby brain stuff. Like when you have babies, you let them smell you. You, as a mother, you shove things down your clothes that they can then snuggle at night, all that kind of stuff. So the smell aspect I find really intriguing because smell is one of the senses that AI is yet to really get into and start commercializing hardware from. But I was like, how do we look at the edges of frustration for people where the lack of sleep is actually dangerous? And with brain shrinkage or brain issues that come with shift work particularly, this is an area that's a matter of health span and lifespan and quality of life. We know as well that they've only just really understood what lymphatic drainage is. And so this is effectively the clearing out of waste products in our brains. It's only recent neuroscience that's really come along that to the point of common conversation. So if you don't get enough sleep, effectively you're at risk of Alzheimer's, is the crude aspect to it. If you don't allow your brain to clean out, what on earth are you decision making around? I did a Forbes article recently where I basically said, if you've got a CEO that's running on, a 19-hour workday and sending emails in the middle of the night, but then that CEO is then dealing with a cybersecurity issue, say, the next day, they're already running on the equivalent biologically of a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05, which puts you over the legal limit for driving. So you wouldn't allow that CEO to go and get in the car and drive home, but you were going to allow that CEO or that doctor that's been on shift for 24 hours to make decisions. Decisions that can affect a lot of things.
Yeah. Just because I just want to jump in on that. That is where I find things absolutely fascinating from the money side of it, right? So they are clearly on the idea that drive to keep that CEO there is around you need your leadership there. They are in charge of X amount of dollars, therefore they have to be there. The same with the doctor. But there's also, my question for you is the cultural thing about working that hard and that it is seen as the right thing to do, that if you're there working, that the output is clearly, much more beneficial. I mean, you used it before. We're not humanoids, right? We are not robotic numbers.
No.
How does because I'm going to go a little bit off the book for a sec, but also bringing in things like AI. You've spoken about that clearly in what we've just discussed. But at what point do we have to start saying that humans actually need to step back for productivity, for efficiency, but also for the health requirements that you're just alluding to, that CEO working 19 hours, then dealing with not just a cybersecurity issue, but the leaking of personal information or whatever it happens to be, or the doctor making a surgical mishap leading to, TPD or, even death. How do we get through that?
It's interesting because I actually think with the medical world, they're going to get to the point, and I'd like to say it's going to be in the next couple of years, probably even this year, that if you're not using some kind of AI assistance in decision-making, that you're actually going to be potentially malpractice, because it will get to the point where we don't want the AIs to do all of the work, but we want AIs to enable the humans to be the best humans. So we're already looking at robotic surgery, for example. So knee surgery can happen without a human surgeon at all, technically. Whether it's insured and insurable is another question. And I actually think the insurance firms are going to have a role to play in this. Because if you think about your professional liability insurance and your professional indemnity and your public safety insurances, eventually they'll realize where the malpractice suits are coming from, and they'll realize where the ones aren't. And they'll realize what safety processes they have to put in. So will people not using AI actually be insurable? I mean, none of this is coming to fruition yet. I find this all really very interesting because we've gone from this idea of AI is really fringe and a bit dangerous, and it hallucinates and it makes the wrong decisions. But where we are now is humans that are using AI to enable their decision making and critique the AI and build their own, what we refer to as scalable AI systems, rather than just general open AI systems. They're actually able to make better decisions. They're actually able to deal with things more. It's interesting because have you ever had a random breath test?
Oh, yes.
You ever had an RBT? Yeah, right. I've had them. Yeah. Even if I've not been drinking, I feel nervous going through an RBT. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Did you know that in Australia, double the number of car accident fatalities are put down to fatigue than drugs and alcohol combined?
I can imagine that. Long
we are
distance
not
driving,
testing
massive country,
just
space.
tired people making decisions, being distracted, micro sleeping. So we stop and we breathalyze people, but we're not stopping and fatigue testing people. We're not, so that it's interesting from a business perspective, but also from just a general life perspective. If we don't measure it, we don't manage it. If it's not manageable, then it never comes into policy making. And one thing we know in Australia is there's not a single part of this government, federal or state or local, that measures the level of fatigue or sleep in the population of this country. It all comes down to sleep centres, which of course are then vaguely biased in the pool that you pull from, because people that have a sleep issue seek out a sleep support centre or support, a sleep test, an apnea test or a sleep study, etc. But what about our general? We don't ask these questions about general levels of fatigue. But yeah, double the fatalities from car accidents are down to fatigue and not drugs and alcohol. But we never put in anti-fatigue AI cameras in cars, for example, that can see when people are having micro sleeps. But it's coming, and it will come first in professional driving. So truck drivers and other professional drivers like taxi drivers and van drivers and people that are driving on mine sites or people that are driving for oil and gas companies, people that have really high levels of health and safety monitoring and measurement and
I'm going
performance.
to interrupt you there because I think I'm going to bring in your other world there. You've talked about mine sites and truck drivers on there, etc. We know, Rio Tinto is already going down this route. BHP is getting there as well to automated trucks. Is that also the next part of this discussion, which is clearly AI is leading to a point where actually professional transportation will become completely automated? Elon Musk has been trying to do it for several years around Tesla. Where is that?
So I saw Jensen Huang talk at the CES in Vegas in January, and they've just had the GCC, which is the big NVIDIA conference. They've just had that in San Jose this month in March 2026 as we're recording this. Anyway, so in January, he stands there on stage and he shows this smart Mercedes-Benz. And look, he likes Elon Musk. They've got relationships between NVIDIA and SpaceX. It's not an anti-Tesla play at all. I have no problem with Teslas and Elon Musk. But in general, around cars and robotics, that is. The Mercedes-Benz that he had up the picture of on stage is now rated as the world's safest car. Now, one of the things NVIDIA, which is this chip maker that came from the game industry and has now grown into this massive AI factory company, trillion-dollar company, world's first trillion-dollar company, and it's growing. What they did working with Mercedes-Benz.
$4.5 trillion now.
Is it $4.5 trillion now?
Yeah.
So, yes, I like Jensen. Do you know what? I've met a lot of tech bros. I've met a lot of tech billionaires, and I actually really like Jensen Huang. I really like him as a human being. He is a really interesting and lovely guy. I've not met him personally, but when I see, as a presenter, you know this, when you're speaking and stuff, you know whether someone knows what they're talking about or whether they're just a journalist or a CEO that's repeating a brief. He knows everything about his company. So he's there on stage with, Mercedes-Benz. Because if you're going to try and create the world's safest car, you go to Mercedes-Benz, don't you? So you go to this big, well-trusted, brilliant brand that's got like futurism aspects of it, best car design, like amazing things going on with it. Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz, right? And so up on stage, he talks about how it's the world's safest car. But one of the reasons why is because they're doing something called synthetic data generation. So they're actually simulating every single way in which this car could potentially drive through San Francisco. And then they showed us the demonstration of this car driving through San Francisco. And it stopped for the cat over the road. It stopped for the kid that was on the pavement but didn't cross the road. It was watching and learning because it had simulated effectively millions of hours of driving into its AI system. No professional driver will live long enough to simulate that. Now, if you think about neuroscience, or you think about surgery, or you think about cancer research, or you think about drug discovery, the simulation around AI. And in fact, I've even got a quote of his. Look at me, I'm so sad. I've got a quote of his on a Post-it note in front of me on my computer. Structured data is the foundation of trustworthy AI. That was one of his opening gambits at the GTC, just happened last week. And I was like, Jensen, I think you're brilliant. So the idea, just yesterday, I was feeling very smug with myself. I had a meeting in the city in Sydney, and I thought I'll get the 442 to Balmain because I'll get there just in time to get to the school for my parent-teacher conference that I've got to do. So we pull into Balmain, we pull up to Gladstone Park. The driver doesn't stop. He just keeps going. And I'm like, that was the stop that I needed to get to the school on time. So smug face using public transport suddenly becomes, I should have taken an Uber, which is not what you want to have happen. So, I was probably, I don't want to offend bus drivers of the country, but I've also had bus drivers just drive off when they've seen me come off of a ferry, knowing that I'm needing to get the bus. Like, literally looked at me and just driven off. And I'm like, the points of connection and the service aspects of buses, and I've lived in London. I've seen all sorts of forms of public transport. All of it can be improved with automation. Now, whether you remove that human off the bus is another question. I'd say you still have a human on there for safety and for when things go wrong. But in terms of the actual driving of vehicles right now, the biggest risks to us are not driverless vehicles or automated vehicles or autonomous vehicles, however you want to refer to them. The biggest risk to us is the human driving the car. Like, just last week, we've got crossings in Balmain again. Everyone knows where I live now. But I was literally about to walk across one, and this woman in a beautiful white Mercedes-Benz just flew over this crossing. And I was like, if my 6-year-old had just been slightly ahead of me running, you wouldn't have seen him and you'd have gone straight through him. And so, again, when we think about the lives that can be saved through car accidents, not only just from fatigue management, but actually from having higher levels of autonomy, even if that human was still in charge of that car, if it had been that smart Mercedes-Benz, not a regular Mercedes-Benz, it would have stopped for me. It would have forced her to stop for me. And so again, car insurance. Where is this going to make a play now in terms of car insurance? The whole world is going to come upside down, Evan, when we start really scaling
we are.
these
Can I bring you in? Because that point is interesting, because you bring that back into your book as well with regards to what you're also talking about is pace, right? So you talk around the pace of what we now do, the fact that, let's use your woman for an anecdote in terms of, we have no idea what was distracting her, why she was in such a hurry, why she was driving the way we were. And again, your link back to insurance, particularly, protection insurance is the real fascinating part here about your sleep is also part of that, right? So this is what you talk about with regards to the stress that you feel in what you do, your actions that you take the day after, all come back to where it is. So we need to then move to how do you actually improve it, right? So we've talked about AI, we've talked about how it integrates it, but you are quite passionate about how you use technology to the optimistic side, the optimism side, to improve yourself. Take us through the different ways that actually will get us out of the current rest deficit that we clearly believe that we have. The word is believe, because the other issue you have with it is that we believe it is rather than it actually being fact.
Quantified. So it's interesting, isn't it? We have more and more wearables. And it was actually a post-pandemic thing. You know, a lot of people started buying the new generation Apple Watches because they have blood oxygen monitoring in them. A lot of people have got the Whoops. A lot of people have got Fitbits. A lot of people have Garmins. A lot of people have all of these different things. So we are creating these digital twins of ourselves. But right now, that's all historical information coming forward to go, this is your score. What's going to happen now is a term that I came across when I was researching for this book called Fiduciary AI. Now, a fiduciary AI is effectively an AI that's going to now, it's not quite an agent, but you could have it as an agent. You could create an app on Lovable if you wanted to have a go at vibe coding to create your own personal sleep assistant. What these things are going to do now is they're going to start giving you advice. So when you start combining, oh, you went to KFC on your Google Maps and then you didn't sleep till midnight and, you know, there'd been a football match on, and your heart rate was really high and you had a really bad night's sleep. What we know is if you're going to be like that again, we're going to cancel your 8 o'clock appointment in the morning and not start your workday till 11 a.m. because we know you're not going to be well enough rested to jump on a call and make decisions at 8 a.m. And by the way, you know, do you want to not have the KFC combined with the soccer match and see if that still makes you, you know, have not enough sleep? Is it just the World Cup football that you watch, or is it all types of AFL that you watch or NRL that you watch? Like, what is it that's causing these cortisol spikes and adrenaline spikes that then stop you from being able to have a good night's sleep? So that's where you actually find you will have your own little Jiminy Cricket sleep assistant on your shoulder going, Catherine, stop doom scrolling. It's 11 o'clock at night and you've got to get up and look vaguely humid in the morning and your sleep score is going to be terrible. But it will also come down to hormone management. It will come down to medical conditions. And so this fiduciary AI is actually going to become incredibly interactive and more of a dialogue than a monologue, which is what we're getting off a lot of our wearables and nearables at the moment. I find it very interesting from a women's health perspective too. And I have a chapter in the book for women and for men to read about women and women's health and motherhood and small children and hormones and all that jazz, because it affects half the population. Yeah, every single major sleep book I've read doesn't even mention the word woman or hormones. And I'm like, you lose, all these male science writers have just lost half of the population by not including us in the conversation. That we're able then to work out, for example, they think they can actually predict if someone's got endometriosis from their sleep data. And the reason why they're able to do that is because the pain of endometriosis wakes people up in something called a microarousal. And so they can actually start picking up not only from your HRV and your sleep apnea potential and your heart rate and your cardiovascular stuff, but we're now looking at other diseases. So for example, Alzheimer's changes sleep patterns, or do sleep patterns change Alzheimer's? And this is this whole thing that we're not quite sure of yet, which comes first, the chicken or the egg. But for example, I've got one of these mats, these Withings mats, and I tried it last night for the first time, loved it. I've got one for my husband. Now, my sleep apnea score was basically 0, but I have a feeling we may pick up something with my husband. And in which case, because of how he sleeps, the noises that come out of that man overnight, we've all been there. When he says he's tired, but he's been in bed since 8 o'clock, and you sort of think, how are you tired when you've been in bed for like 9 hours? Like, how can you still be tired? And the key behind this, though, is to recognize that these things may be a quantifiable piece of information, but they're not God. And so we have to avoid this thing called orthosomnia, which I talk about in the book too, which is this constant nervousness you have about sleep. And you won't fall asleep because you're worried about your sleep score. Or the first thing you do is wake up and check your sleep score. And you rely so heavily on the quantitative information in front of you that you never think to challenge it. So, for example, if you have a crappy sleep score, but you feel okay, don't let the sleep score then make you feel bad about yourself. Or if you have a great sleep score.
You talk about that a bit further in the book, like just going back a little bit further again, is that you clearly alludes to the fact that even though you might have on your sleep score the other way, a good sleep that the score gives you, but your perception is that you had a shit sleep, you will lead with that. Or as you said before, you might go and have a 9-hour sleep, which is in inverted commas, the standard thinking, seen as oversleeping. 8 hours a night is seen as a good night's sleep, but that doesn't
For women,
actually,
it's 9 or 10.
Yeah, right. But what you're talking about again is that it's not actually about the time. It's about the rest quality it brings. You can have interrupted sleep and do 4 hours interruption and then another 2 or 3 hours and actually have better sleep than if those that have had the constant. How does that all fit in? And where does the AI technology come to where it may actually need to start possibly looking at, waking you up, going, right, you've had what you need to do, you've had a good sleep and away you go?
It's interesting, isn't it? It will get to that point where you'll be down and up according to, like, I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is vagus nerve stimulation. So how can you actually switch on your parasympathetic nervous system to enable you to have a better night's sleep? And the thing is, you can't just, even popping a pill does not give you a good night's sleep. You have to look at this from a holistic perspective of how your night routine and your sleep hygiene is, the wind down, how you shut off from work, what you do to relax your brain. People are different chronotypes too. So this is one thing that always used to bother me in the corporate world. Like, I'd be pulling 100-hour weeks just before I got the Queensland Businesswoman of the Year and then the National Corporate Businesswoman of the Year for the drone work I was doing, because effectively I had to have enough billable hours to keep myself employable. But then I also had to generate a brand new business line at the same time. So I was like pulling 100-hour weeks. But God forbid on a Tuesday, if I didn't turn up to that office, like if I turned up at 11 a.m., the water cooler victory of the office would just take over. And I was thinking, I worked 12 hours on Saturday and 12 hours on Sunday, but you didn't see that. But you'll have a go at me for turning up at 11 a.m. because I'm exhausted on the Tuesday. My boss never had a problem with me. It was the bitchery that you get in corporate offices, right? And so there's this perception of, how people work. So there's something called chronotypes. And in fact, for HR professionals watching this, your chronotype working is actually really interesting. You'll get a lot more productivity out of people if you allow them to work to their natural chronotypes. So some people might genetically be night owls. People will resonate with this. You're either a lark or a night owl, or you've got something going on whereby you're more productive to do certain things in the morning and more productive to do certain things in the afternoon. People that I know that are really high level folks, they have a snooze or a meditation or a sleep in the middle of the day. They'll take an hour and they'll probably get 20 minutes of sleep, or they'll be relaxing, but they'll be doing something in that middle of that day to, again, take the pressure off of their brain, enable them. So we will have sleep pods in the office. We'll have chronotype hours in the office. All of these things will come in to allow us to maximize our biological productivity. I find that really interesting. And that, again, comes down to digital twins, but also knowing thyself. Some people, and I start the book with this example as well, some people wake up in the middle of the night and they're awake for a couple of hours and they get really angry with themselves that they're awake and they can't get back to sleep again. And then they do eventually get back to sleep again. And then suddenly their alarm goes off at 6 o'clock, but they've not really felt like they've had enough sleep. This is something that's been recorded in historical record and even in poetry from hundreds of years ago, that people would have two sleeps. You'd have your first sleep and your second sleep. And that's what they were referred to. And in the middle of that, you'd have 2 or 3 hours where you'd go and hang out with the neighbours. You'd do a bit of work. You'd sit and have a little read. You might pray. You might get it on with your lover. You might do all of these different things in that sleep window in the middle of the night. And so that is, again, perfectly normal. And I'd throw back to you, Evan, who came up with the 9 to 5 Monday to Friday? Yeah?
Correct, yes. Who did do that?
It was Henry Ford. And Henry Ford was a really very strange, when you look at how he worked, he would be totally a toxic boss right now, right? And I can say this because he's dead. He's not going to sue me.
Oh, no, but it's proven fact that he was very, very toxic in terms of how he operated. I mean,
he was fundamental extremist.
Just incredible mental, like studies after studies after studies show that he is the creation of some of the societal structural cultures that we now believe is fact. So yeah,
not
9
biological.
to 5 was one of them. The automation of the workforce, and that the workforce was probably, in his view, the first robot that existed. I mean, the whole assembly line of a car and the Model T Ford was about machine driving efficiency. It's not just what you're talking about right now. It's in all Western economic concepts, which is efficiency. And realistically, as I refer to it, it's exploit, right? As hard as you can. Get it down to a singularity, dial it down to black and white on a spreadsheet, and automate the hell out of it till it basically makes it, so efficient you don't have to do anything else. But exploitation means that you don't grow. You're not exploring. Sorry, that's my little rant. I've gone off.
I love it because you're spot on, but it wasn't really Henry Ford's fault. It was Thomas Edison's, right? So as soon as we had a light bulb, some people would be like, this is great. This is much healthier than gaslight. This is much healthier than all of these other things, candlelight and all the smoke that comes from it. So, electric light bulb, so much more effective. No, what they were like is great. How can we develop shift work? How can we develop people working 24/7?
Nocturnal and diurnal cycles didn't exist once the light bulb came about. You can turn a light on.
It's crazy.
And you can work until AMs in the morning, right?
That's what I did when I wrote this book. It's ironic. I had the worst sleep of my life when I was in the final edits of this book. Because you know what it's like. I was up till 3 a.m. because the kids are finally asleep. And then it's 9 o'clock. And then it's like, I'm going to just get on it. And then it's midnight. You're like, I'm just going to keep going. And then again, I'm not listening to my own research. I'm not listening to my own writing in getting this book done. But it's funny what people do in their sleep. So there's a few different anecdotes that I like to throw into the conversation. So Thomas Edison had something very much something in common with Salvador Dali. And you'd never think that you'd put Thomas Edison and Dali, but this is a good one for Christmas dinner. Right, so there's a certain phase of sleep, which is when you're literally falling asleep. They call it N1 sleep. It goes for about 5 to 7 minutes. And in that, you are incredibly impressionable. And this is where we actually have to start talking about habeas corpus of our sleep, as in we own our sleep and we own our data. Because this is where if someone advertises political advertising to you or marketing to you, that's when you're really impressionable. So what happened was both Salvador Dali and Thomas Edison used to prime their brains to try and be able to take advantage of this pre-sleep first stage of sleep window, which was incredibly creative, incredibly, high information processing. So they'd sit thinking about the problem. They'd sit with a metal object like a ladle or a ball or whatever, a metal object in their hand over a metal tray. And they'd be sat in their chair. And as they were falling asleep, as soon as they got into that M1 sleep, your body starts to relax and go into paralysis. And after a couple of minutes, you will drop that ball and it will wake you up. And then you write everything down. And then you go, right, again. And then they'll fall asleep. They'll drop the ball, they'll wake up, they go, right, they write it down. And so they both got their ideas from manipulating their sleep. Now, if I was to go a bit weird, because I know this is...
surely.
Well, it depends how long you go for, I suppose, isn't it? I mean, how many times do you do that? Like, talking to a woman who's up till 3 a.m. finishing a book, like I don't know that I can really judge them. But there's great rock artist Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones was obsessed with recording his sleep. And so he would set a tape recorder in the 60s and 70s and just record what happened whilst he was asleep. But if I start singing a Rolling Stones riff to you, I'm going to wonder if you get this. I'll tell you, but you'll get it. But are you ready?
Yep.
Da, 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 da. Satisfaction. He fell asleep, woke up in his sleep, recorded that riff, fell back asleep and snored for another 4.5 hours. So that riff, one of the most famous Rolling Stones riffs, was created in someone's sleep. I just find the human brain so amazing. And Michael Crichton, the late great science fiction author, in his book Prey, has this quote that I repeat so many times. Trying to understand how our own brains work is like trying to bite our own teeth. And so anything we can do to increase our capabilities, it's half guesses, quite frankly. But the idea that you could come up, obviously he'd had a day in the studio, he'd been playing or thinking about things, right? I mean, obviously he'd been thinking, he was a musician, professional musician, thinking about the next riff. And there it was in his sleep. Da, 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 da. Can you imagine? Can you even see this situation in like a hotel room with all the paraphernalia around and the rock and roll lifestyle and a broken television set and all that kind of stuff? And he literally sits up, records it, puts his guitar back down and goes back to sleep. I just love that story. And
so
it's there. You can find that on the internet.
Can I bring back the anecdotal
totally
to you? And also sort of what you and I do. We both do keynote speaking. We do lots of it. And now that you say that, I must admit, I find myself waking up at about 11 with an idea for an opening gambit to a keynote. So I will wake up, get up and write it in a diary. And I've only started doing it in the last 2 years. But now that you say that, I have definitely done that. Like I have definitely gone, that would be a really, really creative, engaging way to open that key concept. And I'll go and write it down and then go back to sleep.
It's interesting because there's this whole thing now, dream engineering. I'm not quite as bad as that. My recommendation to you would be not to get up and actually write it down, to actually just speak it into your phone as like a note.
Yep.
So you don't have to switch the light on and write everything down and everything. I've just lost my thread of
yeah, sorry, I threw one at you.
I'm only on a 72% sleep score this morning, Evan. So, got to go easy. I'm doing the hashtag working mom life, recording with yourself today. But there's something about brain engineering, sleep engineering and dream engineering. So lucid dreaming is something that a lot of people love. It's like playing a computer game live. I've people come up to me say, I lucid dream every night. I love my lucid dreams. Other people are like, I can remember lucid dreaming when I was a teenager, but I've never done it as an adult. But there's a couple of startups that have kicked off from MIT Media Lab that are producing ways in which we're going to be able to engineer our own dreams. So you're going to be able to have fun all night long, in a dream state and do whatever you need to do without any harm to life or limb, create the next Rolling Stones track, who knows? But the thing that bothers me about that is then as soon as you've got something that you're able to do and use, then you've got something you can sell. And so what is the commodification of our sleep going to be? Is it going to end up looking like the TV show Severance, where we have time when we're awake and time when we're asleep, and we'll be selling our brains to do work whilst we're asleep because there's only so much work we can do in a day? It's very interesting.
That is... I could talk to you for
I've gone
well and truly over your time. And not only that, I'm fully aware that you are a very, very busy person and have a keynote to give in a minute. So
yeah, I have to actually make myself look like a professional human. You've got the working mom this morning, but
I know, it's perfect. This is as raw as we can get it. So as I always finish with all of my guests, I will ask you my final question, which is, Dr. Catherine Ball, if you're in charge for just one day, what would you do?
In charge of where?
So that is completely up to you in terms of how you can go really micro, really macro, or anything in between.
If I was in charge of Australia's R&D spend, I would immediately put our investment into science and technology and artificial intelligence up to 10% of GDP. And I'd keep it there for the next 20 years so that we could become the next version of Norway in a technological world, the way Norway is in oil and gas, and that our children don't have to pay to go to university, and our house prices are reasonable, and we make our own petrol, and we do whatever we need. So we've got our own economic stability. I say this purely as a mother of 2 boys under 10. But we need to seriously go from the 1% we're currently at to 10% of our GDP into science and R&D. I'd literally just be getting all of the universities, putting them past a level of, just verification, and then just throwing the cash like Oprah Winfrey. You get a grant, you get a grant, you get a grant. Go and solve cancer, go and solve MND, go and get us to the moon, go and solve climate change. Thank you.
Brilliant way to finish. Catherine, it has been an absolute pleasure on having you on Exchanges. The book is amazing. If you haven't gone and get it, go out and go and have a look. It is an incredible book. Congratulations. And it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks so much.
Big thank you to Catherine. It is an absolute pleasure to have someone like her on this podcast. She doesn't do it very often, and that's why I am so incredibly privileged to get what is one of the most incredible thought process brains in this space that I have ever met. She is absolutely brilliant, as you can hear from her responses. And please go and have a look at not just the book around sleep, but also her previous books, Converge, for instance, around how technology and where technology will fit into our lives over not just the current sort of scenario, but not just the future, but why it will be interlinked into everything we do in ways that we've never thought of before. Please go and check her out. She's absolutely incredible. To you out there, as always, thank you so much for watching, listening, and everything in between. Please don't forget to subscribe wherever you are doing this. We need to continue to grow our community. At the moment, only around about 32% of you are subscribing to listening to this podcast. So please, if you can, give us a subscribe, or even give us a like, and an overall review would be even better if that's possible. We are continuing to grow the Exchanges podcast scenario, which is great. We do need more of you to subscribe to it. So if you could, that'd be fantastic. Don't forget, we've got an email. It's exchanges@evanlucas.com.au if you've got any ideas, thoughts, processes, or guests that I can have in. But until next week, thank you as always for joining Exchanges. We'll speak to you then.